Commander Vex-9 of the Caltharian fleet watched the smoking remains of what had once been the mighty human defense station through his tactical display. The battle, if you could even call it that, had lasted exactly 47 minutes. Not bad for a species that still used kinetic weapons and chemical propulsion, he thought with a satisfied click of his mandibles. Status report. Lieutenant Zix, Vex-9 commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 17 star systems before lunch. All human vessels destroyed or disabled, sir. Their flagship, the, let me check, the Defiant Hope, is venting atmosphere on 3 decks. No response to surrender demands. Typical human stubbornness, I suppose. Vex-9 chuckled, a sound like grinding metal. Stubbornness, more like stupidity. They actually thought those antique railguns could penetrate our shields. How quaint. The bridge crew of the dreadnought Inevitable Victory shared in their commander's amusement. After all, this was the same species that had taken 300 years to develop faster than light travel. The same species that still argued about whether their planet was getting warmer. The same species that had somehow managed to almost destroy themselves with nuclear weapons before they even left their home system. Sir, I'm detecting some unusual energy signatures from the human station, reported sensor technician Kyle 2, her tentacles dancing across the bio-neural interface. It's strange, almost like they're powering something up. Vex-9's 4 eyes narrowed. Powering up? With what? We knocked out their main reactor 20 minutes ago. The unknown, sir. The signatures don't match any known human technology in our databases. Probably some last-ditch attempt at a distress signal, Vex-9 dismissed with a wave of his primary manipulator. Let them cry for help. By the time any reinforcements arrive, we'll have strip-mined their precious little outpost and moved on to the next target. The Caltharian invasion force had been systematically working its way through human space for the past 6 months. Planet after planet, station after station, all falling before the superior technology and tactics of the Caltharian Imperial Navy. It was almost boring how predictable it had become. Wake up, scan for human presence, overwhelm their defenses, collect resources, repeat. The humans fought bravely, he'd give them that, but bravery without proper technology was just another word for foolishness. Commander, Kyle 2's voice carried a note of concern that made Vex-9's spines bristle. Those energy signatures are getting stronger. Much stronger. Define much stronger, technician. Well, sir, they've increased by approximately 3,000% in the last 30 seconds. Vex-9 felt a cold sensation in his primary stomach. That's not possible. Show me. The main tactical display shifted to show the human station. What had been a barely functioning wreck moments before was now pulsing with an intense blue-white energy that seemed to make the very fabric of space shimmer around it. Sir, I'm reading massive gravitational fluctuations. Whatever they're doing over there, it's affecting local space-time. Impossible, Vex-9 muttered, but even as he said it, he could see the stars beginning to bend and distort around the human station. Lieutenant Zix's voice cracked slightly as he spoke. Commander, I'm getting reports from the fleet. Ships are experiencing temporal displacement. The frigate Swift Conquest reports that their chronometers are running backward. Backward. The universe exploded. Not literally, of course, but that was the only way Vex-9's mind could process what happened next. Space itself seemed to tear open like fabric, revealing something that his brain absolutely refused to accept as real. Through the rip in reality stepped something that looked vaguely humanoid, but wrong in every conceivable way. It was tall, easily 3 meters, covered in what appeared to be armor that shifted and flowed like liquid metal. But the most disturbing part was its face, or rather the complete absence of one. Where features should have been, there was only a smooth, reflective surface that seemed to show not your reflection, but your deepest fears. "What in the name of the void is that?" Six whispered. The thing moved with impossible grace, stepping through the vacuum of space as if it were solid ground. Behind it, more figures emerged from the tier in reality. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. "Sir, I'm detecting massive weapons signatures from the entities. Energy output is off the charts." Vex-9's training kicked in, overriding his shock. All ships, battle stations, target those, whatever they are, full bombardment. The Caltharian fleet opened fire with everything they had. Plasma cannons, antimatter torpedoes, exotic particle beams, weapons that could crack planets and boil atmospheres. The barrage was so intense that it created a miniature star in the space between the fleets. When the light faded, the human entities were still there, completely unharmed. One of them, presumably the leader, raised what might have been an arm. When it spoke, its voice carried across the vacuum of space impossibly, reaching directly into the minds of every Caltharian in the fleet. "You have made a mistake." The voice was calm, almost conversational, but it carried an undertone of something that made Vex-9's carapace itch. It was the sound of inevitability, of judgment, of something that had seen civilizations rise and fall and found them all equally amusing. "You thought you were fighting humans. You were wrong. You were fighting human children, playing with human toys, following human rules." The entity gestured, and half of the Caltharian fleet simply ceased. Not destroyed, not vaporized, just gone, as if they had never existed at all. We are what humans become when they stop playing games. Vex-9 felt his mandibles chattering uncontrollably. What are you?" "We are the Ascending. We are humanity's gift to the universe when it decides to stop being polite." Another gesture, and the remaining Caltharian ships found themselves frozen in space, their engines dead, their weapons offline, their crews trapped in vessels that had become their tombs. "You see, Commander Vex-9," the entity continued, somehow knowing his name, "humanity has a curious trait. They compartmentalize. They have rules for war, rules for peace, rules for everything. They try very hard to be civilized. But when you threaten their children, when you destroy their homes, when you push them too far..." The entity moved closer, and Vex-9 could see himself reflected in its featureless face. But the reflection was wrong. It showed him as he truly was, a frightened creature who had mistaken technological superiority for actual strength. They stopped following the rules. "This is impossible," Vex-9 managed to croak. "Humans don't have this kind of technology. We've studied them for centuries." "Oh, we've had this technology for quite some time. The question was never whether we could use it. The question was whether we should." The entity's voice carried a note of what might have been sadness. "You've been fighting our regulars, Commander, our conventional forces. The ones who still believe in proportional response, in giving quarter, in following the laws of war. They're good people, our regulars. They try to minimize casualties, even among their enemies. Another ship vanished from existence. We are not our regulars. But this is. Unfair? Disproportionate? Absolutely. You wanted to see what humanity was capable of when pushed to the brink. Congratulations, you succeeded." The entity gestured again, and suddenly the bridge of the inevitable victory was filled with images. Planets burning, stations exploding, Caltharian civilians fleeing in terror as their worlds fell to human forces. Every world you've taken, every station you've destroyed, every life you've snuffed out. Did you think there would be no consequences? We were following orders, Vex-9 stammered. So were we. The entity moved closer still, and now Vex-9 could hear something else in its voice. Not just inevitability, but something that might have been regret. The regular forces, the ones you've been fighting, they argued for mercy. They said that you were just following orders, that you were products of your society, that you could be reasoned with. They wanted to offer you terms, to negotiate a ceasefire, to find a peaceful solution. And what did you say? We said no. The word hung in the space between them like a death sentence. You see, Commander, there's something your intelligence reports got wrong about humanity. We're not just stubborn. We're not just adaptable. We're not just clever with our primitive technology. The entity's reflection in the tactical display showed not one figure, but thousands, all standing in perfect formation, all waiting for orders that would decide the fate of civilizations. We're patient. Incredibly, terrifyingly patient. We'll take losses that would break other species. We'll endure hardships that would drive others to madness. We'll watch our children die, our homes burn, our loved ones suffer, and we'll just keep going. Vex-9 felt his knees buckle. What do you want? What do we want? We want you to understand that you've been fighting the wrong enemy. Every ship you've destroyed, every station you've taken, every human you've killed was a vote. A vote for whether humanity should continue trying to be civilized. The entity raised its arm again, and Vex-9 could see the tear in space-time widening behind it. More figures were emerging. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. The votes have been counted, Commander. Civilization lost. Please, Vex-9 found himself saying, we can negotiate. We can. No, STOREIS. The single word cut through his pleading like a blade through silk. You had your chance to negotiate. You had your chance to be reasonable. You chose to fight children instead. The entity's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow echoed through the bridge. Now you get to fight us. The tactical display lit up with new contacts. Not hundreds. Not thousands. Millions of them, pouring through the tier in reality like a tide of inevitability. Sir, Kyle 2's voice was barely audible. I'm reading massive fleet movements throughout Caltharian space. They're everywhere. Everywhere, Vex-9 croaked. Every world, every outpost, every ship. They're all under attack simultaneously. The entity nodded as if this was perfectly reasonable. We told you, Commander, we're patient. We've been preparing for this moment for quite some time. How long? How long have you been fighting our regulars? 6 months? We've been watching for 6 years. Vex-9 felt the last of his hope drain away. 6 years? We needed to be sure. Sure that you wouldn't listen to reason. Sure that you couldn't be deterred by conventional means. Sure that you had truly crossed the line from which there is no return. The entity gestured one final time, and the bridge filled with the sound of screaming. Not from the humans, but from across Caltharian space, as the full might of humanity's true military force made itself known. You wanted to see what humanity was capable of, Commander. You're about to find out. The last thing Vex-9 saw before the darkness took him was his own reflection in the entity's featureless face. But now the reflection showed the truth. He wasn't a conqueror. He wasn't a warrior. He was prey, and the hunters had finally decided to stop playing with their food. The battle was over. Now the real war could begin. Admiral QX Prime of the Caltharian High Command had seen many things in his 4 centuries of military service. He had witnessed the conquest of the Nexari Empire, the subjugation of the Voltan Confederacy, and the systematic destruction of a dozen lesser species. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for the reports streaming in from across Caltharian space. Status report. He barked as he entered the command center of the orbital fortress above Caltha Prime, their heavily defended homeworld. "Sir, we're receiving distress signals from every sector," reported Communications Officer Nix-7, her voice trembling despite her training. "The 3rd Fleet at Borvac Station, they're gone. The 7th at Nexus Point, gone. The 12th Armada defending the Outer Rim, also gone." "Gone? What do you mean, gone?" "Not destroyed, sir. Gone. As in, there's no wreckage, no debris, no trace they ever existed." QX Prime's 4 hearts began beating in an increasingly frantic rhythm. "That's impossible. Show me the tactical display." The massive holographic map of Caltharian space flickered to life, showing the positions of their fleets, outposts and colonies. Or rather, what used to be their positions. Red indicators were vanishing one by one, faster than the system could update. "By the void," QX Prime whispered. "How many ships have we lost?" "Approximately 60% of our total fleet strength, sir. And the losses are accelerating, sir." Another officer rushed forward. "I'm getting a priority transmission from Commander Vex-9's task force. It's not good." The transmission crackled to life, filled with static and what sounded like screaming in the background. "This is Commander Vex-9 of the Inevitable Victory. We are under attack by something. Not human ships, not human technology. Something else entirely. They're not destroying our ships. They're making them disappear. Our weapons are useless. Our shields might as well be paper. They're inside our minds. They know everything we know. Oh no, they're coming for the bridge." The transmission cut to static. Sir Nix-7's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm detecting massive gravitational anomalies throughout the system. Whatever the humans are using, it's affecting the fabric of space itself." "Impossible," QX Prime muttered, but even as he said it, he could see the stars outside the command center beginning to flicker and distort. "Admiral," his tactical officer spoke up, "we're receiving a transmission. It's from the humans. Put it through." The holographic display shifted to show a figure that made QX Prime's blood run cold. It was humanoid, but wrong in every conceivable way. Tall, imposing, covered in that impossible flowing armor, and with that terrifying absence of features where a face should be. "Admiral QX Prime," the entity spoke, its voice carrying that same impossible quality that reached directly into his mind. "I am Ascended Unit Designation Terra 1. You may consider me humanity's final diplomatic envoy." "Diplomatic?" QX Prime managed to stammer. "You're systematically destroying our entire civilization." "Destroying?" "Oh no, Admiral, we're not destroying anything. We're simply collecting what is ours." "Yours? We conquered those worlds fair and square." The entity tilted its head in what might have been amusement. "Fair and square? That's an interesting perspective. Tell me, Admiral, when you bombarded the civilian population of New Geneva, was that fair and square?" Images suddenly filled the command center. Caltharian ships reducing human cities to glass, civilian transports being hunted down and destroyed, children running in terror as orbital bombardments turned their playgrounds into craters. When you executed the surrendering crew of the merchant vessel Peaceful Trader, was that fair and square? More images. Caltharian soldiers executing bound prisoners, torture chambers. slave camps. When you ordered the biological weapons attack on the agricultural world of Harvest Moon, condemning 3 million civilians to slow, agonizing death, was that fair and square? Cook's Prime's mandibles clicked nervously. Those were military necessities, acceptable casualties in war. To us, to the Caltharian Empire, we are the superior species. We have the right to. The right to what? To commit genocide, to torture prisoners, to target civilians. The entity's voice remained calm, but there was something underneath it now. Something that made the very air in the command center feel heavy and oppressive. You keep using that word. Rights. Tell me, Admiral, what rights did you extend to the children of New Geneva? They were enemies of the Empire. They were 5 years old. The simple statement hit like a physical blow. Cook's Prime felt his legs give out, and he slumped into his command chair. Sir, his sensor officer called out, I'm detecting more gravitational anomalies. They're getting closer. How close? They're in the system, sir. Multiple contacts moving at speeds that shouldn't be possible. All defensive platforms, open fire. All ships, attack formation. The massive orbital defense grid of Caltha Prime came alive, thousands of weapon platforms unleashing their fury at targets that seemed to dance between the beams of energy. The Caltharian home fleet, over 200 ships of the line, opened fire with everything they had. It was like trying to fight shadows. Sir, our weapons are having no effect. The entities they're not even trying to dodge. They're just ignoring our attacks. Ignore them. Cook's Prime's voice cracked. How do you ignore a planet-killer missile? Watch. Terra One's voice came through the speakers, and suddenly the main display showed one of their most powerful dreadnoughts firing its main gun directly at one of the human entities. The beam, capable of cracking continents, struck the figure dead center. The entity reached out with one hand and caught the energy beam. Just caught it. Like someone catching a ball. Then, with a casual gesture, it threw the beam back at the ship that had fired it. The dreadnought vanished in a flash of light. Your weapons are impressive, Terra One continued conversationally. Very efficient. We've been studying them for quite some time. Thank you for the demonstration. This is impossible, QX Prime repeated, but his voice held no conviction now. Humans don't have this kind of technology. You're barely above primitive. Primitive. The entity's voice carried what might have been laughter. Admiral, do you know what your mistake was? What? You confused restraint with weakness. The display shifted to show human space, but not as the Caltharians had seen it. This was different. Cities that gleamed with impossible architecture, ships that moved like living things, technologies that bent the very laws of physics to their will. You saw our frontier worlds, our outer colonies, our defensive fleets. You thought that was all we had. You thought we were trying our best and failing. You were holding back. We were being polite. The entity gestured, and suddenly the command center was filled with more figures, dozens of them, all with that same terrifying absence of features, all radiating that same sense of inevitable doom. You see, Admiral, humanity learned something very important during our early wars. We learned that there are two kinds of conflicts, wars of necessity and wars of choice. Wars of necessity are fought with whatever you have. Wars of choice are fought with whatever you need. What does that mean? It means that when you chose to target our civilians, when you chose to torture our prisoners, when you chose to commit genocide against our colonies, you transformed this from a war of necessity into a war of choice. Terra 1 moved closer to the display, and now QX Prime could see himself reflected in that featureless face. But the reflection was changing, showing him not as he was, but as he would be. And we choose to end you. Wait. QX Prime leaped to his feet. We can negotiate, we can make reparations. We can. No. The word carried such finality that it seemed to echo in the bones of everyone in the command center. You had 6 months to negotiate, 6 months to show mercy. 6 months to remember that wars are fought between soldiers, not against children. But we can change, we can change. Admiral, let me show you something. The display shifted again, showing a recording from one of the human colonies. Caltharian soldiers were herding human civilians into what looked like processing facilities. The scene was horrific, but what made it worse was the sound of Caltharian laughter in the background. This was taken 3 days ago. 3 days, Admiral. Even after you knew you were losing, even after you knew we were coming for you, you were still murdering our people. That was just a few rogue units. We can discipline them, we can. A few rogue units. Admiral, we have recordings from over 200 worlds. The systematic torture, the mass executions, the use of civilians as living shields. This wasn't a few rogue units. This was policy. The entity's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow filled the entire command center. You made your choice, Admiral. Now we make ours. What choice? The choice to show you exactly what humanity is capable of when we stop being polite. The gravitational anomalies around Caltha Prime suddenly intensified. Space itself began to buckle and warp, and through the tears in reality, more figures emerged. Not hundreds this time, not thousands. Millions upon millions of them, stretching to the horizon and beyond. Sir, his sensor officer's voice was barely audible. I'm reading impossible numbers. There are more of them than there are stars in the galaxy. How is that possible? Because, Admiral, Terra 1 explained patiently, we've been preparing for this moment for a very long time. Every human who ever lived, every human who ever died, every human who ever will be born. We are all here. That's impossible. You can't bring the dead back to life. Can't we? Admiral, you've been fighting our children, our present. But when you chose to target our civilians, when you chose to commit genocide, you made it personal. And when humans take things personally, we don't just fight with our armies, we fight with our history. The display showed the truth of it. The endless ranks of the Ascending weren't just current humans. They were every human who had ever lived, every hero, every warrior, every victim of tyranny who had ever dreamed of justice. You wanted to see what humanity was capable of. You're about to find out what 4 million years of human evolution looks like when it's angry. Please, QX Prime fell to his knees. We surrender. We'll do anything, we'll. Surrender? Admiral, you can't surrender to us. Why not? Because we're not here to conquer you. We're not here to rule you. We're not here to make you our slaves or prisoners. The entity's voice carried no emotion at all now. Just simple, terrible truth. We're here to make sure you never threaten anyone ever again. What does that mean? It means, Admiral, that the Caltharian Empire ends today. Not just your military, not just your government, your entire species, every last one of you. The horror of it hit QX Prime like a physical blow. You're talking about genocide. Yes. But you're supposed to be the good guys. Good guys? The entity's voice carried something that might have been sadness. Admiral, we stopped being the good guys the moment you made us choose between being good and being effective. You can't do this, it's wrong, it's justice. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. You see, Admiral, there's something your intelligence files got wrong about humanity. We're not just stubborn, we're not just adaptive. We're not just clever, we're very, very good at learning from our mistakes. What mistakes? The mistake of mercy, the mistake of proportional response, the mistake of thinking that showing restraint would be interpreted as strength rather than weakness. Terra 1 gestured, and suddenly the command center was filled with images of Earth's history. Wars, genocides, atrocities spanning millennia. We've been the victims of genocide before, Admiral, many times, and every time we swore it would never happen again. We built institutions, we wrote laws, we tried to be civilized. And it didn't work? Oh, it worked, for us. But not for everyone. There are still species out there who think the way you think, who believe that might makes right, who see civilians as legitimate targets. The entity's voice carried a weight of centuries now, so we've decided to send a message. A very clear, very permanent message. What message? That there are consequences, that there are lines you cannot cross, that there are some things that will not be forgiven, cannot be forgotten, and will be paid for in full. The gravitational anomalies around Caltha Prime reached a crescendo. The very fabric of space began to tear like cloth, revealing something beyond that hurt to look at. Goodbye, Admiral. Thank you for the lesson. What lesson? That sometimes being good means being absolutely, utterly, completely ruthless. The last thing QX Prime saw was his own reflection in Terra 1's featureless face, but now the reflection showed the truth. The Caltharian Empire was ending. Not with a bang, not with a whimper, but with the simple, terrible efficiency of a species that had learned to stop playing games. The battle was over. The war was over. The genocide was over. And somewhere in the distance, a new message was being transmitted across the galaxy on every frequency, in every language, to every species that might be listening. This is humanity. We tried being reasonable. We tried being proportional. We tried being civilized. It didn't work, so we're going to try something new. We're going to be absolute, cross certain lines, and you will cease to exist, not just your military, not just your government, your entire species. This is not a threat. This is a promise. This is not negotiable. This is final. Choose accordingly. The message ended with the coordinates of what had once been the Caltharian Empire. Now it was just empty space, as if an entire civilization had never existed at all. The battle was over. Now the real peace could begin,